Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com, and I thought it would be interesting now to start to build a kind of complete or semi-complete little example of the stuff that we're doing here. And for that reason, in this tutorial I'm going to start creating a little website which I call Picture Squirrel, because this is actually I had some HTML files lying around from a site that I started to develop, which involved showing people pictures in order to help them to learn languages. And for that's why I've called it Picture Squirrel. And the object of this tutorial is I'm going to start showing you how to take some HTML files and graphics files and that kind of thing that have maybe been created by a designer, or you could have got them by, you could have created them yourself, or you could even have saved a website that you found on the internet, although of course you have to be careful with copyright restrictions. And I'm going to show you how to take those resources and turn them into a dynamic web project. So I've got this site. Actually, let me show you the original site that I was working on. So that this is my site here, and you can do stuff here. This is actually Flash, but it could also be an applet. And I've just taken a kind of homepage from that site, and I've stripped it down here to a footer and a header. And there's a footer here which has just got like a copyright notice in it at the moment, and there's a very simple header here with just one graphics file, a simple logo in it, and the content could go here. Now if I look at that on the disk, I've actually saved it here, and I've got a home.html file, I've got a one graphics file, my logo, and I've got a style sheet, style.css. And as I say, if you create websites yourself, you'll probably start off by designing them either by hand, as I have done here, or in something like Dreamweaver, or if you employ a web designer, then they would create these kinds of files. And the challenge is now to turn those into a dynamic web project with actual functionality in it. So I'm going to start, well, I've already started actually, by creating a dynamic web project here. And let's start by creating a servlet, which will be our controller servlet. So I'll right click my project here, and I'll go to New Servlet, and I'll just give it a package, let's say controller, and I'll put a class in there called controller. This is just a servlet. And let's go through this, and I don't know, I might need the init method because I'll probably want to use a data source. And I'm going to click finish here. So now let's just check that I can run this servlet. I'll select it and click the green run button, and I should see a blank web page. Here we go, that looks good. Now the next thing I'm going to do here is I want to make it so that if I go to the context root of this web application, which here is picture_squirrel, but if I upload it, the context root could be nothing. It could be blank, and just going directly to the URL should invoke this servlet. So I want it so that when I go to the context root, I go to the servlet directly, and to achieve that I'm just going to open web.xml. I'll actually right click it and go to open with text editor this time, and I've got this welcome file list up here, and I just want to copy one of these as an example and paste it in and change this to controller, which is the name of my servlet, so controller. Save everything, and let's just click run again. And what I want to check is if I now go to the context root here, then I should see my servlet, and here it is. Now the next step is I want to, in this tutorial I just want to get the home page up and running basically. And I'm going to right click in my web content here, and I'm going to go to new JSP file, and let's call this home.jsp. Click finish, and in my controller in the doGet method, let's just have a forward here. So I'll say get servlet context, or I could just use the request object. dot get request dispatcher, and I'm going to dispatch to /home.jsp and just say forward and request, hit the tab key, and response, hit the tab key again, and just put the semicolon in there. So now my servlet at the moment will just forward to my home page, and let's go to home.jsp and just put hello in there and save everything, and I'll go to the servlet now and select that, and let's just run that and check that this works. So I should see hello now for my home page. And in fact I've got some problem, null pointer exception, and well, I wasn't expecting that, but I think that, let's go to, oh yeah, the reason is I think the reason is that I'm saying get servlet context, but actually I don't know, but let's just do it a different way. Let's say request dot get request dispatcher and see if that will run, and it could just be some weird caching thing or something. I think actually that if you say get servlet context, so let's go back to the servlet here. If I were to say here get servlet context dot get request dispatcher, I think that mapping has to exist in web.xml, and if you look at web.xml here, yeah, I've got a mapping for my servlet, but I haven't got a mapping for my JSP file. It's just directly in web content, and because I don't want to have to add a mapping, for that reason, if I use request.getRequestDispatcher, it works, and I think that's the reason why get servlet context doesn't work. But anyway, I don't want to dwell on that here. So let's go back to my home.jsp, and now I'm going to go to the home page of my website. So I've got this, let's see, I've got this home.html here. I'm going to right click that and open with my, I've installed an editor, which is my favorite text editor, Notepad++, and I'm just going to open that here and select all this stuff and copy it. This is a free text editor, and it's really nice if you do a lot of programming stuff. And I'm just going to replace nearly all of this with my HTML. So I probably want to retain this dot type at the top, and I definitely want to retain this this kind of page directive at the top here. So let's save that, and if I run that now, I'm going to see a page, but my logo is going to be missing. Let's just run it, and so is my style sheet, so it doesn't look like anything, even though that's in fact the same page as this in terms of the HTML. Now the next thing is I want to get my graphic, my logo in here, my images in here. I've just got one, and my style sheet, which are completely standard kind of web technologies. So let's go back to Eclipse now, and under web content I'm going to right click and create a new folder, and I'll call this style. You could call it anything, and I'll do the same again, right click and create a new folder which I'll call images, and you might typically have one for JavaScript as well, for example. So I think these are in the right place directly under web content. And now let's go to Explorer here and go to my resources that I want to import, and I'm just going to drag this image into the images folder. Or another way of doing it is I'll just select copy files there. Another way of doing it is to go to the root of your workspace on your actual disk. If I right click here, go to properties, resource, you can see that this is where my project actually is, and just copy the files into the folder corresponding to web content, which you'll find on the disk, and then just right click your project and click refresh. That would be an equivalent way of doing this, but this way is perhaps simpler if you've just got a few files. So let's go to Picture Scroll again, and I'm going to go to style.css and drag that into the style folder, copy files, there we go. Now I think the last thing that I want to show you in this tutorial is just how to fix up the context root here. So if I go to home.jsp you can see it was referencing logo.png, and you've also got a reference here to style.css. These are standard kind of HTML tags, and I need to make those relevant to the context root. And one thing I need to say is that the actual path, for example, to style.css will be slash, and because I haven't added a mapping for it, but I can find it directly under web content, it's going to be slash style, the name of my folder, slash style.css, and for my image it's going to be, I called the folder images, so it'll be slash images slash logo.png. Now this slash here at the beginning means relative to your domain name, and of course it's not going to be relative to my domain name, at least while I'm testing, because I've got this context root here, picture_squirrel, and that can change when I deploy it. So I want some way here of inserting the context root, and we've seen already a way of doing that with a expression tag, but now I'm going to show you the wonderful expression language, the STL way of doing it, which is really, really nice and succinct. And that is, so I'm going to use expression language, so I'll type $ here, and I'll have my curly parentheses, and I'll use the page context object that I've showed you previously. So I'll type page context, and once you've typed it, if you type a dot and then control space, autocomplete starts working, and I want the request object from the page context, and I'm not quite sure what happened there. Let's just maximize this. So there we go, and then I'll type a dot again, and somewhere in here I can find the context root. So let's say context path is what I want, and that will fill in the context path, and if it's blank, like if you upload it to Cloudbees or something, then that will be blank, and the path will be just directly relative to your domain name here. But for testing purposes, the context path is picture_squirrel in this case, and I want that to be filled in. And let's put that there for my image as well. And now if I've got everything right, now then if I run my website here, let's select controller and just, or maybe I'll just select the project and just run it as I'll say run on server, and here we are, we've gone to the context root, and I've got my fully functioning web page here with my my footer, my header, the whole HTML file, and the correct paths filled in for the image and for the style sheet. And by the way, if you don't know HTML or CSS, like a really good way to learn is just to look at existing websites and just go to save as HTML in your browser, and just try customizing them yourself, and then look up tutorials if you need to by typing in the names of tags or whatever. And the only thing you have to be aware of is copyright, although naming no names, certainly it's been common among my colleagues and friends who do this kind of thing to just save a website and just change it for their own purposes with different graphics and change the styles a bit, and then use that as the basis for their own website. And it's if you've changed everything, it's very, very unlikely anyone will accuse you of infringing copyright, although it may technically be an infringement. Okay, that's it for this tutorial, and in the next tutorial we're going to look at dividing this up a bit into a header and a footer using the C import tag, which is another way of importing one page into another. So until next time, happy coding.